Hi viewers, programmers and coders, whatever you are. Thanks for making it to this YouTube channel. So today we shall be continuing with our JS series, and we'll be looking at the Fetch API. So the Fetch API is a JavaScript interface that is used to make HTTP requests to a given web server and to receive a response in return. So an HTTP request is a communication between your computer, which is the web client, to a web server that helps you to retrieve data that is either cached on it or from a database through it. So HTTP, as you may know, is the hypertext transfer protocol, which is a set of rules or guidelines that direct the communication between the web client, which could be your computer or your phone, and the web server. And with that, you're able to access and exchange data between the two. And if there is a database, also that you get to it through the web server. So the Fetch API is commonly used in JavaScript and most applications, as I've said, to retrieve data. So getting started, if you look at this HTML document that I've written as my template, I have two buttons, fetch users and fetch photos. So we are going to use the Fetch API to get users and photos from an endpoint, of which we are going to use the JSON placeholder as our source of data. So this is a free website that gives us dummy data for testing the applications. And we are going to use an endpoint that points to either this data, photos, and the users. So you look at this array that has very many objects that contain different photos and also this data of users. And we are going to use the URL that points to them. Okay. So this is the base URL. In this case, it's pointing to those, but we'll be looking at photos and users. Or we could just copy this and then put a slash to photos or users so that we access them. So let's get started. I'll start by creating a function for this button, fetch users. I'll call it function. Let me copy and paste it to make my life easy. Okay, curly braces. So we use the fetch API by writing the fetch keyword, then curly braces. And the first argument that we are going to pass is the URL. So I'll put my okay, then not here, it will be this one. Okay, I'll copy this. So I'll put my quotation marks and then enter the URL and then slash, since I need users. If I want to point to users, the endpoint is going to be slash users. So I'll write users here. Okay, so that's the first argument. The next argument is going to be an object, as you call a payload, that has the configurations that you want to make. So it has different properties, but I'll write the method that I want, which is the get method, which is the one that I'm going to use to communicate to the server, that tells the server that I want to get data from it. So there are other configurations that you may put in this object, such as defining your headers, what is in the header, and also putting in some other details. For simplicity, I'll not go into them, but I'll show you later on once we retrieve data what it appears like. Okay, so the first argument is the endpoint, which is the URL, then the object, configuration object, and then we are going to chain the .then method, which is a promise. So a promise is a method that after fetching data from an endpoint, it's only going to be executed once we have something, let me say a response. And so that the .then method, we are going to receive our response. And then with that response, we want to convert it to JSON. Response.json. Okay. And then we can have another method, but then what we want to do with that response. So after getting that body, which is going to be the data, we want to do something with it. And so we shall do something in this code block with that data that we shall receive, of which it is, of course, to display it on our screen here. So we're going to put in logic that will display it on the screen. And then the last chaining is going to be the dot catch. Okay. So the dot catch method is only executed once we fail to retrieve data from the backend, if something happens. And so we want to receive the error and maybe log the error message to the console and know if we were unable to get data, what could have caused it. So that's going to be error.message. The error object has a message property that can tell us why a certain retrieval of data failed. Okay. All right. So now let me just log to the console the data before we do anything. Console.log the data that we shall have retrieved. It's going to be fetch an if here. So let's try it to the console and see. All right, so we get our data here that has been fetched from the user's endpoint. And if I click right here on the users, that endpoint, we should be able to see the data that we are retrieving. And here it is. We have each object. We have the address. Then we have the company name. We have the name, Lynn Graham, the phone number, the username, and the website. Okay, and that's the very first person here, Lynn Graham. All right, so now that we have the data and we've converted it to JSON, so the reason why the very first year why you convert it to JSON is that once you receive data, it's on a read stream, so it is stringified and it has also other details about the headers and stuff like that. But we are basically interested in only the data, the array that contains the object, and that's why we have to do the JSON method. So we have the method, the data here, which is an array that contains very many objects, and we're going to use an array method to get out every item in that array and display it on the screen. So then we shall use the data.map, the array method map. For the map, we shall get every user, and we want to display every user on the screen. Okay. So for that, I need to first get hold of the paragraph where I want to display the user, which is this paragraph here that has the ID add data. Okay, this paragraph that I created here in my HTML. This is called add data. So I'll copy this string, the ID, and then let me get hold of it right here in my JavaScript. So const parent var it's going to be document that gets element by ID, and then I'll paste in my ID. So after getting hold of it, let me create some child elements in which I'm going to use to display my data. First thing I'm going to say const name element. It's going to be document.create element, and I'll call it a paragraph. Okay, so let me copy this quite a number of times so that I modify it just a little bit. So what do I want to display on my screen? I want to display on my screen the name, the username, the email, and maybe the city and the address. Okay, so I'll call this username. Then I'll call this the email. And then here I'll call it, maybe just let me display the street, and then the city. Okay, street, the city. All right, then let me just put one that I used to separate them, like on the screen, so that I can see that these are different pieces of data. I'll call that data separator. something. Oh, just got the paragraph here, paste it right here. So I've created child elements. The next thing that I want to do, I want to add data to these child elements. So I'll start with the name element. Then I'll use inner HTML to add data to it. I'll use a template literal, and then I will put this and that. Now let me copy this right here. How many times? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll copy it 5 times. Okay, I'll do 6 times. So the very first one is going to be the name element, and I want to make it user.name. So I'm getting hold of the user here, that name. This is going to be user.username. This is going to be username element. Then this is going to be email element. It's going to be user.email. Okay, then this is going to be street element. So for the street, I need to access it through the address. Okay, it's going to be here. User.address .street, and then the next is going to be the city element. I'll access it through the same thing here, but I'll put city. Okay, it's gonna be city. And then the data separator, something that I just want to put there so that the data looks nice. It's data separator element. Let me put element here. For that, I just want to put maybe a dotted line. All right, so I've already added data to my inner elements. What I have now to do is to append them to the DOM. Okay, and for that, I'm going to do now my parent paragraph, which is this one up here, dot append. And then I'll pass in all the child elements that I want to append. That's going to be the name element. It's going to be the username element, and then the email element, street element, city element, and then the data separator. All right, so I've finished adding data, appending it to the parent element. Now let's fetch it and see. Great. So once I fetch the data, here it is. It appears on the screen. Okay. It appears on the screen. The first person is Len Graham, and then the username, and then the email address, the street, and the city, and then this line that I put in here, which is the data separator to show. So I've been able to fetch all these people from an endpoint that's from the back end, and then display them on the screen. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to the next method where we want to fetch our photos from this endpoint. We want to fetch photos from the endpoint that has photos. And for that, we are going to use this function. To do that, so I come here and write a second function. Okay, for that, I'll copy this and then press it in here. So now let's make some changes right in here. I'll leave this here. I'll delete this. No, I need that. Then I'll remove stuff in here. This is going to be photos. Our endpoint is going to change to photos. Okay, our data here, we're going to need each photo. And then, after getting photos, so for the photos, how to display the title of the photo, the ID, and then the URL. Okay, so let's create some child elements. So the first thing that I would do is I'm going to say title element, const title element. It's going to be document.create child element. It's going to be a paragraph. Okay, let me copy this one more time. Okay, 2 times. The next is going to be ID element. This is going to be a paragraph, and then the other one is going to be an image element where we're going to display the image. This is going to be an image. Let's create an image element. So we have our 3 elements. Excuse me. Now we want to add data to them. So I say title element dot inner HTML. And that's going to be photo, the title. Okay, it's going to be photo.title, and then here, let me copy this, press it here, photo.id, ID element, photo.id, and then the image element. So for the image element, we want to add a source attribute, that's source. And for that, we want to get the URL. It's going to be photo.url. Okay, it's the one that we shall use to display the photo, the image. Now let me append the children. It's going to be the title element, and then the ID element, and then the image element. All right, so let's try this out and see. If I fetch photos, I should be able to see them right here. Data separator is not defined. Okay, small error right here in HTML. I need to create the data separator element. I'll just copy it from here, from my previous function, and paste it right here. So if I fetch photos, I should be able to see them right here. Great. So here's the data coming from the console, where you can see there are 5,000 photos. So many photos. But then if I want to move this here. Okay, great. So here are the photos. Each photo has been fetched, the title, the ID. So it's really, it's not like a photo and image where you see something like in data init. It's this endpoint here, the URL points to a placeholder. So it's something like a facsimile of a photo, but just showing what it would look like if there were actually images that were saved in their database that you could access through their server, the JSON placeholder server. But this is the images, and we are displaying them. And then the image, the data separator here, maybe not yet, just to show the difference between each photo. So as you can see, it takes a while to actually display the images. That means it takes some time to communicate to the server, and then the server retrieves the photo from the database, and then again through the server, and then we're able to get them on our computer, which is the web client. That's why it takes some time. Now, let me look at the network tab to see if I can get some more details about this request. Moving into the network tab, we can see more data about the photos that we just fetched. Okay, so if I click on the photos here, I can look at the headers. The headers in my request shows me my endpoint, the URL from which I'm fetching the photos, and then the method, the request method, which is the get, and then a status code of 200, which shows okay. So the different status codes that you can get in case um, the network request succeeds or fails or something else happens. If it fails, you get 404. I guess the times you've tried to probably search a website and gotten 404, no response. That means your client, your computer has failed to communicate with the server. Maybe the website is no longer there or something happened along the way and you couldn't retrieve data to display on your screen. And then we see the remote address of this, the remote address, which is the IP address. And then we can also get more details about the response, the headers in the response. Allow access control, allow, yes, true, it was allowed, then the credentials. And so we can get a lot of information about the request that we've just made, okay? So these are the headers, which you would actually, if you wanted to preset some of these properties, you could do it right here, as in this object here, in this configuration object, as you send your request. Then you can have a preview. The preview will show us all the data that we've received back from the server, which is the same as what we've been logging in my console, in the console here. And then we can look at the response. So this is the data that we retrieve, the response that we get. It is similar to the one in the console right here, okay? So that's the response. And then we can look at the initiator. What functions are we using to actually call that data? And you can see fetch and show photos, which is the function that we are calling right here. And then the event, which is the one click. And then these are the files, fetch API, fetch.html.js, and then this is my local IP address, of course, for my computer. And then the timing, we can have some more details about the timing. We can look at how long did it take. So you can see it was queued. When I made the request, it was queued for 0.5 milliseconds. And then the connection stalled for 1.15 milliseconds. And then DNS, that's domain search lookup, domain naming service. That's the DNS. We're looking at the endpoint, the JSON placeholder.com, how long it took for my request to look it up, 41.47 milliseconds. Then the initial connection, that's between my computer and that web server. It took 33.82 seconds. And then the SSL, this is the protection, the encryption. It took 3.82 milliseconds. And then there are some details about the request, how long it took us to send the request, and then how long it took for the server to respond, to process our request and give us back a response or data, and then how long it took to download the data. So all in all, sending my request and retrieving the photos took 209.09 milliseconds. So we can get more details about what we are doing and how we are making this request, how long it's taking to be processed, and how long we get the data. So we can get all those details under the network, under this network tab, once you're communicating to a web server through HTTPS. Okay. And I think I want to point out maybe other images. Here you can see all the images. So these are the IDs of all the images that are fetched. Okay. And each image has its own, this is the size of the image. And if we look at the time here, it has a different time that it was fetched, that it took to be fetched and displayed on the screen. Okay. Yeah, so, okay, I hope it moves. Just wanted to show you, pull it up here so that I could show you more of the time. Oh, computer is misbehaving a bit. All right. Yeah, so we can click on every single image and get its timing, how long it took to queue, to install, and then to download it. So for each piece of data that we received. All right, so in a nutshell, I'll move back to my console and then pull this back. I don't think it's necessary, but let me just do it. So in a nutshell, that is how we use the fetch API to fetch data from a backend endpoint through a server and then display it on the screen. And that's typically what happens when you're browsing any website on the internet. Once you click some tab or something, it calls data from the endpoint to which that tab points to, and then retrieves data and then displays it on your screen. Same as on phones. Yeah. So thanks for watching. It's been a little lengthy, I think, or medium, not sure. It will be up to you, the viewers, to judge. But thanks for watching. And this is the last video of my JS series. For those of you that have watched the entire series from the start to the end, that's great. If not, I encourage you to check out more videos in this series and follow the channel, subscribe, and I'll be producing more content for you in coding. Thank you. See you next time. Bye-bye.